One company, 7 billion yuan of registered capital, about $1 billion. Founded in August 2023. No website, no public disclosures, no product ever shown in public. That is the company whose reported scanners took roughly $44 billion off ASML's market value in a single session 2 weeks ago. Last time on this channel, I took apart the machine and the tape. This time I want to show you the thing almost nobody priced, the org chart. Because the clever engineering in this story may not be the lithography at all. It may be corporate. One bench of engineers, for company names, a blacklist that covers some of them and not others, and a rule that comes back on November 10th. Start where Washington thought the story was. Shanghai Microelectronics Equipment, known as SME, founded in 2002, is the company the United States actually blacklisted. It went on to the Commerce Department's entity list effective December 16, 2022, in a batch of 36 Chinese entities, on the grounds of acquiring U.S. origin items in support of China's military modernization. In 2024, the Bureau of Industry and Security added 3 more SME subsidiaries. And then SME stalled. It withdrew its planned public listing in October 2024. Its most advanced product actually shipping in volume is the SSA 600, a 90-nanometer class dry argon fluoride scanner. That is a real machine. It is also roughly 2 decades behind the frontier. Here is the best single piece of evidence for where SME's production-grade capability actually sits, and it is not a press release. In December 2025, SME won a single-source government contract worth roughly 110 million yuan, about $16 million, for a krypton fluoride scanner specified at 110 nanometer resolution with 15 nanometer overlay. That is what a customer was willing to write a purchase order against. Meanwhile, the 28 nanometer immersion tool SME announced back in 2023, the SSA 800, has never been deployed in a fab. A shareholder post claiming its successful development was taken down shortly after it appeared. So in February 2025, a new company appeared. Amy's Technology, based in Shanghai, spun out of SME, and critically, not on the entity list. An AMIS employee told China's Star Market Daily that its core personnel and technical assets came from Shanghai Microelectronics Group, and that it was set up to target fast-to-market equipment. The risk research firm Karen reviewed patent data and found that since Amy's was founded, SME has transferred to it full or shared assignment of several thousand patents, covering laser heating, silicon wafer alignment, and lithography machines. Chinese corporate records show the 2 companies share 2 direct minority owners, share state parents higher up the ownership chain, and as a result share board members. Then the front end moved as well. During 2025, SME's front-end lithography work was transferred to Shanghai Yuliangsheng, a company founded in 2022 with 1 billion yuan of registered capital, about $149 million, and tied to Seacarrier, the Huawei Link toolmaker that Washington added to the entity list in December 2024. And above all of it sits Aishengna. Reuters reported that Shanghai Aishengna Electronic Technology Group, founded in August 2023 with 7 billion yuan of registered capital, absorbed the engineering teams of both Yuliangsheng and SME. Its shareholders are Shanghai Electric Holding and a subsidiary of Shanghai International Trust. Same engineers, different letterhead. Now the part that turns an org chart into a policy story. On September 29, 2025, the Bureau of Industry and Security implemented what became known as the affiliates rule. In plain terms, any entity 50% or more owned, directly or indirectly, individually or in aggregate, by one or more entity list companies automatically inherits those restrictions. No new rulemaking required. It would have swept up subsidiaries and spin-offs by arithmetic. It lasted 6 weeks. On November 10, 2025, the rule was suspended for 1 year as part of the agreement between Washington and Beijing, alongside a 10% cut to reciprocal tariffs and China suspending its own export controls on rare earths, gallium, germanium, antimony, and graphite. 1 month after that suspension took effect, the transfers ran. Starting in December 2025, SME sold its 100% stakes in 2 subsidiaries the United States had never targeted: Shanghai Weiyao Industrial, a metals and materials processing firm founded in 2003, and Shanghai Dongshu Investment Development, an investment company. The buyer both times was AMIS. The South China Morning Post reported the Weiyao deal at 228.5 million yuan, about $32 million, logged on the corporate database Kachacha, and reported in early January. I am describing a sequence here, not proving an intent. But the sequence is this: the 50% rule goes dark, and a month later the ownership moves. Jacob Feldgoys, a senior data research analyst at Georgetown's Center for Security and Emerging Technology, described it to Karen as a cat-and-mouse game, where BS adds new companies to the entity list, and those companies then take countermeasures by pulling parts of the business down into a subsidiary or spinning it off entirely. Whatever the intentions, he said, SME has created a new entity that is able to purchase U.S. origin items more easily than would otherwise have been the case. And BAS is not blind to this. Its own published guidance says that if a company acts as an agent, a front, or a shell company for a listed entity in order to facilitate transactions that would not otherwise be permissible, that would likely violate U.S. export controls. The doctrine is not the problem. The problem is that applying it takes a fresh rulemaking, one company at a time. And we know that machinery works because it has already been used on exactly this pattern. Effective September 12, 2025, BS added 2 Chinese companies to the entity list: GMC Semiconductor Technology in Wuxi and Jitsuan Semiconductor Technology in Shanghai. The stated reason was that they had acquired U.S.-origin semiconductor manufacturing equipment for 2 already listed SMIC entities in Beijing without the required license or authorization. Their license applications are now reviewed under a presumption of denial. So the procurement front pattern is not a theory, and it is not an accusation I am making. It is a documented, published enforcement action with names attached. It simply requires the government to find each channel and publish each one at a time. So how much of all this has actually converted into machines on fab floors? China's own Semiconductor Industry Association publishes the Honest Scoreboard. In 2025, domestic equipment took 35% of Chinese fab purchases. That beat Beijing's own 30% target, and it is up from roughly 10% 3 years earlier. That is real progress, and it deserves to be said plainly. Now break it apart by tool type. Etch and thin film deposition passed 40% localization. Metrology reached 25%. Lithography managed 18%, and most of that 18 is trailing edge and packaging tools. Lithography is the one line on that scoreboard that has barely moved. But do not mistake 18% for nothing, because AMIS is quietly winning the part of lithography almost nobody watches. By August 2025, it held a delivery ceremony for its 500th stepper. That particular machine was bound for SJ Semiconductor, a company the United States itself added to the entity list back in 2020. In November, its first in-house 350-nanometer stepper, the AST6200, passed factory acceptance and shipped to customers. And AMIS says its advanced packaging lithography system holds about 35% of the global market and 90% of China's. Advanced packaging is the one route to more computing power per chip that does not require a leading-edge scanner. The unsanctioned spinoff owns that route. And here is what China's own industry leadership says about all of it, which is more sober than any Western analyst note. In March this year, SMIC co-founder Wang Yangyuan, together with the heads of YMTC, Nora, and the EDA firm Empyrean, jointly described China's chip tool industry as small, fragmented, and weak, and called for national consolidation. Big Fund 3, $47.5 billion, is being redirected toward lithography and EDA. Meanwhile, Nora has become the world's 5th largest chip equipment maker by 2025 sales, moving ahead of KLA, booking 27.14 billion yuan across the first 3 quarters of 2025 against 6.05 billion for all of 2020. It has only just started developing lithography tools for the first time. Which brings us to the constraint that actually sets the number 5, and it has nothing to do with Shanghai's engineering talent. Many of the critical components inside these scanners are still imported from Japan. Delays at the domestic suppliers trying to replace those parts are what capped this year's output at around 5 units. Read that again, because it inverts the entire panic. The bottleneck is not that China cannot design an immersion scanner. It is that China cannot yet source one. And the 2027 target of 20 machines assumes a domestic component base that has not been established yet. Every one of those imported parts sits inside the reach of any future export control round. It is also worth being precise about what has and has not been demonstrated. Neither Shengna nor any named customer has confirmed the report. No machine has been shown publicly. No throughput figure and no overlay figure has been disclosed. For reference, ASML's current flagship immersion tools run around 330 wafers per hour at roughly 2.5 nanometer overlay. 5 machines is about 3.8% of the roughly 130 immersion systems ASML deploys in a typical year, against an estimated 98.7% share of the immersion market. The Financial Times, which reported that SMIC has been testing a domestic immersion scanner under the codename Mount Everest since September of last year, benchmarked it against ASML's TwinScan NXT1950i. That tool entered the market in 2008. Now the counterweight, because this is the part that can make all of those specifications stop matching. From the end of 2025, new fab capacity added in China is required to source at least half of its equipment domestically. That is a mandate, not a market. It means these scanners have a guaranteed customer base regardless of how their specifications turn out, which is exactly why yield, overlay, and reliability data may never be the thing that decides adoption. And separately, Reuters reported in December that China had built an advanced lithography prototype assembled from parts of older ASML machines procured on secondary markets. The bill of materials is the story from both directions at once. So how did the market resort itself once it had 2 weeks to think? I pulled the closing prices myself. Measured against the July 23rd close, the session before the report, here is where things stood at the August 7th close. ASML down 3.5%. Lam Research down 2.9%. Applied Materials down 4.2%. KLA still down 9.3%. And measured from the July 29th trough, Applied Materials is up 23.5%. Lam up 23%. KLA up 16.5%. ASML up 12%. The American complex has essentially round-tripped the entire event. Japan did not. Using the August 6th close, the most recent one available to me, Tokyo Electron is still down 16.1% from July 23rd. Nikon is down 10.2%. And in the same window, Advantest, which makes chip testers and sells no lithography at all, is up 6.9%, above where it started. Canon is flat. I am reporting the split, not asserting a cause, and Japanese equities carried their own August options settlement pressure through that window. But the shape is worth noticing. 2 weeks in, the market has stopped trading chip equipment as a single block. And in Hong Kong, the supposed beneficiaries never recovered at all. SMIC is 7.6% below its pre-report close. Hua Hong is 8.5% below. So here's what to actually put on a calendar. The single biggest date in this story is not a product launch, and it is not an earnings call. It is November 10th, 2026. That is when the suspension of the affiliates rule automatically expires unless BIS takes further action. If it snaps back, every entity 50% or more owned by a listed company inherits that listing by arithmetic, with no new rulemaking needed. Given how much of the structure we just walked through runs through shared state holding companies and common parents, that is the moment the org chart either starts matching a great deal or stops matching entirely. Watch for BS signaling an extension, an amendment, or a quiet renegotiation before then. Second, watch the names themselves. Aishengna, Amy's, and Yuliangsheng are not on the entity list today. The GMC and Jitsuan editions from last September show exactly what it looks like when Washington decides a procurement channel has crossed the line. If any of those three names appears in a Federal Register notice, that is the real story, not a one-day stock move. And separately, keep waiting for verification of the machine itself. A confirmed acceptance by SMIC, Huahong, or CXMT of a production line tool, or a public showing with throughput and overlay numbers attached to it. Until one of those two things happens, 5 is a plan, not an installed base. Third, the competition that has nothing to do with Beijing at all. Nikon's new president, Yasuhiro Omura, who took office on April 1st this year, told Nikkei Asia that Nikon intends to undercut ASML on argon fluoride immersion by manufacturing many parts in-house, giving it an advantage in cost competition. Against an average ASML deep ultraviolet tool price of around $82.5 million. That is a genuine commercial threat at mature nodes. Nikon shipped 11 argon fluoride systems in the year to March 2024, and the nearest hard data point lands on August 13th, when Applied Materials reports, with the street looking for roughly $8.95 billion of revenue. That number will tell you more about actual demand than any lithography headline this month. Nothing in this video is investment advice. So to close it out, the market spent 4 sessions pricing a machine that has never been shown in public, built by a company with no website, using components it still buys from Japan. What it did not price was the part you can actually document. A blacklisted champion, a spin-off that is not blacklisted, several thousand transferred patents, 2 subsidiaries sold 1 month after the 50% rule went dark, and 1 shared engineering bench sitting under 4 different corporate names. Lithography is a decade-and-a-half problem. Corporate structure is a paperwork problem, and paperwork moves a great deal faster. The date that decides which of those 2 wins is November 10th. If you want the market mechanics of the original sell-off, session by session, the earlier deep dive on this channel takes the tape apart. Subscribe, and I will keep tracking this one.